Does God use the motion of the planets to communicate with us, to announce things to come? Well, many people believe that an astronomical occurrence called 4 blood moons is a message from God. Blood moon is a full lunar eclipse, and 4 of them in a row is called a tetrad. When they've occurred on the Jewish high holy days, it's coincided with major historical events like the Six-Day War in 1967. 4 blood moons on the Jewish high holy days has happened only 3 times in the last 500 years. The next time it occurs is starting next spring on the Jewish Passover.
These are not theories, these are facts.
He is not guessing here. He's not just making things up out of his head. He's looking at astronomical events that are timed, they are accurate. People who don't even believe in the Bible are the people who observe all this.
Exactly. And so I like to use science, I like to use math. These aren't theories, these aren't me guessing at something. And people, the nice thing is, everything is backed up. You can go right to NASA's website and see all of these things.
All the way back here is the Spanish Inquisition, when the Jews were kicked out of Spain and persecuted heavily. And then what happened here, they came back into their land. This is marking just after they came back into their land. Their government wasn't actually set up until 1949, so this is pretty much official here.
With the eyes of the entire world watching in stunned amazement, Israel declares her independence.
While the world watched the Arab Spring move through the Middle East, Iran focused on developing its nuclear bomb. Inbal calls that the most urgent and dangerous challenge facing Israel. He says while covert actions have shown success, Iran is still making progress.
Therefore, unfortunately, we are left with the last course, and this is military action to stop the Iranians from getting a nuclear bomb.
Will Israel take matters into its own hands?
The feeling in Jerusalem is that we are left alone once again by the international community.
Ladies and gentlemen, Israel will never acquiesce to nuclear arms in the hands of a rogue regime that repeatedly promises to wipe us off the map. Against such a threat, Israel will have no choice but to defend itself.
Does God use the motion of the planets to communicate with us, to announce things to come? Well, many people believe that an astronomical occurrence called 4 blood moons is a message from God. A blood moon is a full lunar eclipse, and 4 of them in a row is called a tetrad. When they've occurred on the Jewish high holy days, it's coincided with major historical events like the Six-Day War in 1967. 4 blood moons on the Jewish high holy days has happened only 3 times in the last 500 years. The next time it occurs is starting next spring on the Jewish Passover.
These are not theories, these are facts.
Okay. He is not guessing here. He's not just making things up out of his head. He's looking at astronomical events that are timed, they are accurate. People who don't even believe in the Bible are the people who observe all this.
Exactly. And so I like to use science, I like to use math. These aren't theories, these aren't me guessing at something. And people, the nice thing is, everything is backed up. You can go right to NASA's website and see all of these things.
All the way back here is the Spanish Inquisition, when the Jews were kicked out of Spain and persecuted heavily. And then what happened here is they came back into their land. This is marking just after they came back into their land. Their government wasn't actually set up until 1949, so this is pretty much official here.
With the eyes of the entire world watching in stunned amazement, Israel declares her independence. For the first time in more than 2,000 years, the Jewish people are once again a sovereign nation. The joy of independence, however, is short-lived. The Islamic world is enraged.
And then the next time that this prophetic tetrad happened on the Lord's feast days was in 1967 and 1968. And of course you know that in 1967 they got Jerusalem back because they were not in control of that.
June, 1967. Surrounded by Soviet-armed enemies and on the brink of another Holocaust, Israel strikes hard, fast, and without warning. In just 6 days, Israeli forces stun the world. They crush the combined Arab armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon.
What amazes me was back in March of 2008, I saw this total lunar eclipse over the Temple Mount. And I was praying about this, and, you know, as you're very well aware of all the prophecies, you know, about signs in the heavens and the sun turning to darkness and the moon to blood. And so as I was looking this, I went to NASA's website because they have 5,000 years of eclipses recorded. Because God created everything mathematically, they can do this.
Right.
Well, I noticed that there were 4 total blood moons or total lunar eclipses in a row in 2014 and 2015. They fell on Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles in 2014, and then again on Passover and Tabernacles in 2015. I was blown away to see these 4 blood moons falling on the feast days, and I wondered how often does that happen? And I noticed it didn't happen at all in the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1600s. And so I went to the 1900s, and lo and behold, twice there were 4 blood moons in a row, and guess what years they fell? This is what we talked about, 1967 and 68 when Israel captured Jerusalem, and then right after Israel became a nation in 1948. They happened in 1949 and 1950. And so I thought this is an awesome sign. I mean, in Genesis 1:14, God said he created the sun and the moon and the stars to send signs.
It charts history of astronomical occurrences, the Jewish high holy days of Passover and the Feast of the Tabernacles, and these occurrences. And I want to go over just a couple of the things that have happened, because it's only happened in 3 times.
3 times in over 500 years.
In 500 years.
And this is confirmed by NASA. This is not something that a religious think tank put together. This is something that you can check on the internet. This is what NASA says has happened, and this is what they say is going to happen.
This is, and we have a full screen up, and it's exactly what I did when I saw your book, because I wanted to verify that these things had happened, and sure enough it was. That's why I wanted to have you on. 4 blood moons have occurred in 1493-94, fall of Spain, the Jews expelled from them, and Columbus discovers America, what the Bible calls it the infant nation.
Right.
1949 to 1950, it follows Israel being declared a nation.
No sooner has Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion declared the resurrection of the Jewish state than 7 Arab nations attack with all their fury. Overnight, 800,000 Jews find themselves at war with 50 million Arabs. The fledgling Israeli army has not a single tank. Their enemies have 2,000. Yet amazingly, Israel not only wins their war of independence, but succeeds in establishing herself as the only democracy in the modern Middle East. Israel's enemies, however, do not give up. Instead, they regroup, rebuild, rearm, until they're ready to strike again. The leaders of the Arab world vow to throw the Jews into the sea. The Soviet Union sells the Arab powers $2 billion worth of arms, tanks, and fighter jets. Soviet military advisors flood the region, training Arab forces, and even designing a strategy to destroy Israel.
And then 1967-68, the Six-Day War.
They quadruple their land, capturing the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights. They reunify Jerusalem. They bring the Temple Mount back under Jewish control for the first time in 2,000 years. Some call it a triumph of Zionism, a tribute to the skill and cunning of the Israeli Defense Forces. Others call it a miraculous victory, the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But for the Arab world, the Six-Day War is known as Al-Nakba, the disaster, and they vow revenge.
Those are the last 3 times
Yes.
that 4 blood moons have occurred.
Right.
And so the next time it occurs actually is starting next spring.
Starts April the 15th, 2014, next spring, and it happens on Passover. The second blood moon next year will be October the 8th on the Feast of Tabernacles. And then in 2015, it will happen again on Passover. And then it will happen the last time, September the 15th, and that will be on the Feast of Tabernacles.
Every time that this pattern emerges, something fascinating happens to Israel.
Exactly.
It's linked to Israel.
It totally is. And I think the church needs to be aware of that.
The irony of what it takes to get the sun, the earth, and the moon in a perfect alignment, to have a blood moon, and then for those blood moons to be on this exact date, is something that just is beyond coincidental.
It's amazing to me, Gary. One of the most exciting things was, I don't know, I believe you're familiar with the super moon.
Yeah.
The super moon is when the moon, in its going around the earth once a month, when it's at its closest point. Okay, if there's a full moon, it's called a super moon. So think about the odds of this. I know you love math as well as astronomy. You have to look at what are the odds of there being a full moon when it's at perigee, or the closest point to Earth. Then you have to look at what are the odds of this full moon also being a total lunar eclipse, okay, at its closest point.
Right.
It's a supermoon. Then you have to consider what are the chances not only of having a full moon when it's at perigee, having a total blood moon, but also having it being seen in Israel. This is increasing the odds.
Because not all eclipses are seen all around the world. They're seen on one side of the world.
Exactly.
The Bible very clearly says, Joel, the 2nd chapter, says the day of the Lord will be as when the sun refuses to shine. The significant thing is that between these 4 blood moons will be a total solar eclipse, and the moon will be turned to blood. That is exactly repeated in Acts, the 2nd chapter. It is repeated by Jesus Christ in the book of Luke, the 21st chapter, when he said, you will see the sun, signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And when you see these signs, lift up your head, your redemption draweth nigh. We are entering that zone, and it's going to change forever. It's going to change dramatically, and it's going to involve Israel, because it has involved Israel in 1492, 1948, 1967. And each time it has gone from tragedy to triumph. 1492, as you said, the Jewish people were kicked out of Spain with the Edict of Expulsion by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. America was discovered, and the Jewish people had a home until Israel became the state. In 1948-49, Israel was a state. The thing that preceded that was the Holocaust, a time of tears and tragedy. 1967 was the Six-Day War, and then Jerusalem became a part of the state.
You have 4 total lunar eclipses back to back. There's only been 8 times in the last 2,000 years that this has happened. So for God to put these lunar eclipses on his feast days back to back, I really believe there's signals to his body that prophetic times are right ahead. And so I see this cycle where God is pinpointing significant events.
But not just events, but rather events in the life of Israel.
Exactly.
It's centered around the Jewish calendar and the events that bring Israel to another stage of prophetic development, shall we say. Well, this coming series of eclipses, both solar and lunar, that you're looking at now, and by the way, you've documented them. I think you've probably gone into more depth than anybody else. And I want to just say right up front, I congratulate you on the detail of your observations, because it's possible to kind of gloss over a few of these details. But in your studies, you've really gone into some depth and detail about how these things are going to happen.
Yeah.
but I have researched this backwards and forwards. And the concept that these 4 blood moons happen on a high holiday 4 times in a row with a solar eclipse in the middle is beyond the null hypothesis of probability. This is something that the Bible, using the sun, the moon, and the stars as a communication system to humanity, says something is about to change and world history is going to change forever.
Now, one thing that's important to realize, Gary, is I'm not setting dates. I don't control the biblical calendar. I don't control an eclipse. All I'm saying is, as a watchman, God, look at the pattern of what has happened in 67 and 68. Look.
In just 6 days, Israeli forces stun the world. They crush the combined Arab armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon.
Look what's happened in 49 and 50.
No sooner has Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion declared the resurrection of the Jewish state than 7 Arab nations attack with all their fury. Overnight, 800,000 Jews find themselves at war with 50 million Arabs. The fledgling Israeli army has not a single tank. Their enemies have 2,000. Yet amazingly, Israel not only wins their war of independence, but succeeds in establishing herself as the only democracy in the modern Middle East.
It's as though God is saying, I am turning back to my people Israel, and here are the signs that I'm putting up to prove it. Now, I don't want to go too far, but what does this mean? What we have in the Middle East today, just a little departure, what we have is a time bomb, I think.
A literally time bomb.
We're talking about times and seasons. We have a time bomb. We have so many lines of force developing in the Middle East right now. And I think we're literally at a crossroads. Something has to happen. Now, if I look ahead, and I'm not going to try to predict the future, but we're going into these remarkable 2 years of signs. It would seem that that might be the time when something would happen to Israel, as it has done in the past.
You are so right. And the key is to look at the patterns. Again, like you, I'm not predicting, but we can look at the pattern, look at science, just like detectives look at a pattern. What do we see? In 1948, you have a biblically prophetic war take place. And then you have the blood moons. In 1967, another biblically prophetic war takes place with Israel. So I believe 2014, 2015, and we look what's happening in Syria and with Iran, there's a good possibility you could see another major biblically prophetic war take place over the next 2 years.
I think you're right.
With all the chaos and turmoil right now in nations like Egypt, Sudan, Libya, and Syria, you sometimes forget about the impossible situation Israel is in at this very moment. Last week, an Israeli paper interviewed the commander of the IDF's 91st Division about the threat coming from north of Israel's border. The officer said, "We understand that there is more than one factor. Whether this is Lebanese or whether it will come from somewhere else that can ignite the border here." Of course, the continued instability in Syria could also ignite conflict along Israel's border. Right now, Hezbollah, for example, in Lebanon, is believed to have about 60,000 rockets in its arsenal. Just to give you some context, that's about 10 times as much as it had back in the 1980s during the first Lebanon war. Israel's enemies are arming themselves to the teeth. Is there really any doubt about where this is all headed? Just look at a map and see for yourself the unsolvable problems that Israel is facing. But consider again all of the threats taken together that are there against Israel as they come from so many different directions. This report I quoted from is only really just concerning the threat that Hezbollah poses there in Lebanon. But you have Hamas in Gaza. They're also stockpiling weapons. And Hamas and Hezbollah together are really just the pawns of much larger threats that are looming in the background from Iran, for example, and of course eventually, as we've been highlighting here recently, from Egypt as well. War is coming to the Middle East, as we've been saying. War is coming, that's for sure.
Israel is facing its greatest dangers in 20 years. That is the conclusion of a sobering report on the country's security. Chris Mitchell has the details.
A nuclear-minded Iran is only part of the problem. Add a weakened United States with the so-called Arab Spring, and you get...
Israel's now it's in its worst strategic situations since the end of the Cold War.
In his report, the 2011 Arab uprisings and Israel's national security, political change in the Arab world has also brought uncertainty to the region.
What we see is Islamization of some of the countries, and some of the countries are being fragmented.
Israel must beef up its military to counter these threats, Inbar says, because the Jewish state has limited ability to influence the region. While the world watched the Arab Spring move through the Middle East, Iran focused on developing its nuclear bomb. Inbar calls that the most urgent and dangerous challenge facing Israel. He says while covert actions have shown success, Iran is still making progress.
Therefore, unfortunately, we are left with the last course, and this is military action to stop the Iranians from getting a nuclear bomb.
Will Israel take matters into its own hands?
The feeling in Jerusalem is that we are left alone once again by the international community.
The biggest threat is Iran's nuclear program. President Obama has tried to convince Israel not to launch a preemptive strike against Iran. What happens if the world waits too long and Iran does actually get the bomb? What happens in the region if Israel does launch a preemptive strike on Iran? Will we see another major war in the Middle East?
It's possible. It's possible that we could. I think the thing is balancing, you know, what would happen if we do and what would happen if we don't have that attack. So, you know, it probably would be some kind of a war, but I think the consequences of having a nuclear Iran would be far worse.
How critical is U.S. support for Israel? All these potential threats escalate on every side. How critical is the U.S.'s support?
Well, you know, Ephraim, the U.S. is Israel's biggest ally. And without the U.S., Israel pretty much doesn't have a strong ally. So the U.S. support is really crucial. But on the other hand, you know, it's crucial for the U.S. to support Israel because we know that in the end, we don't know if this is the end or not, but we know that in the end that the Lord will support Israel. He'll stand on Israel's side, and he'll stand against anybody who doesn't stand on Israel's side. So it's important for the U.S. to stay on Israel's side.
Amen, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Israel will never acquiesce to nuclear arms in the hands of a rogue regime that repeatedly promises to wipe us off the map. Against such a threat, Israel will have no choice but to defend itself. I want there to be no confusion on this point. Israel will not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. If Israel is forced to stand alone, Israel will stand alone.
The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution has said Tel Aviv will be razed to the ground if Israel attacks Iran.
گاهی سردمداران رژیم صهیونیستی ما رو تهدید هم میکنن، تهدید به حمله نظامی میکنن، اما به نظرم خودشون هم میدانند و اگر نمیدانند بدانند که اگر غلطی از اونها سر بزند جمهوری اسلامی تل آویو و حیفا رو با خاک یکسان خواهد کرد.
Ayatollah Said Ali Khamenei criticized the U.S. and its Western allies, including the U.K., for the public enmity towards Iran. He said such a hostile approach is unwise. He also said the U.S. does not want the dispute over Iran's nuclear energy program to be resolved. That's because it wants to put further pressure on the Iranian nation, but Iran will never be brought to its knees. He said further that anti-Iran sanctions have activated the internal capabilities of the country despite their negative impact and have contributed to great technological achievements. Ayatollah Khamenei said there are some who are displeased with Iran's progress and are trying to undermine its achievements through media propaganda. He said the Iranian nation has, however, emerged proud and victorious in spite of the enemy's plots, and that today, without Iran's vote, no significant issue in the region can be resolved. The leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution made the remarks during an address to the public in the northeastern holy city of Mashhad.
Meanwhile, as Washington mulls more sanctions against Iran, Israel is making it clear that it's ready and willing to strike. But Tehran's chief ally in the region, Hezbollah, has made it plain that it will take sides in case of war. OT's Lucy Kafanov reports now on what the militant faction may have up its sleeve.
A red line should be drawn right here.
The line beyond which lies war with Iran.
Netanyahu would like to be able to communicate to the world that the Israelis are ready, which he has, to attack, and that it will be done with the full support of the United States.
Threat or bluff, whatever the case, an attack would all but guarantee a rapid response from another nemesis of the Jewish state, Hezbollah. The Lebanese Shia paramilitary group has evolved from a ragtag militia to a military and political heavyweight. It's part of the so-called Axis of Resistance against Israel, referring to the alliance between Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, and Iran. Israel's November battle with Gaza was seen as a test for a possible confrontation with Iran. Israeli airstrikes rained on Gaza. In exchange came a barrage of long-range mortars and rockets, most repelled by Israel's anti-missile shield.
The Fajr 5, a rocket threat from Gaza.
The war may have showcased newly acquired weapons by Palestinian militant factions, but Hezbollah's arsenal is thought to be of higher quality and quantity, and experts say that it could launch 4 times as many rockets per day as Hamas. The details of Hezbollah's stockpile are secret, but the group's willingness to use it is not.
Israel was shaken by a few Fajr 5 missiles, which could be counted on the fingers of one's hand. How will it be able to withstand the thousands of missiles that will land on Tel Aviv and elsewhere if it attacks?
The last time Israel and Hezbollah came face to face was in 2006. Since then,
Hezbollah has now accumulated around 45,000 missiles of various ranges. There is one of or part of them that, in fact, the range goes beyond 350 kilometers, which, according to them at least, they can reach the whole of Israel until Eilat in the south of the country.
This museum in the south of Lebanon is designed to display Hezbollah's self-proclaimed military prowess. Captured Israeli tanks and weapons are meant to be a reminder of the danger Hezbollah can pose if provoked.
This is the only Hezbollah tunnel now open to visitors, but a network of secret passageways just like this one stretches across Lebanon. They're used to move fighters and weapons across the country, ensuring that Hezbollah stands ready to strike at a moment's notice. Lucy Kafanov, RT, Southern Lebanon.
I feel deeply honored and privileged to stand here before you today representing the citizens of the State of Israel. We are an ancient people. We date back nearly 4,000 years to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have journeyed through time. We've overcome the greatest of adversities, and we reestablished our sovereign state in our ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. Now, the Jewish people's odyssey through time has taught us 2 things. Never give up hope, always remain vigilant. Hope charts the future. Vigilance protects it. Today, our hope for the future is challenged by a nuclear-armed Iran that seeks our destruction. But I want you to know that wasn't always the case. Some 2,500 years ago, the great Persian king Cyrus ended the Babylonian exile of the Jewish people. He issued a famous edict in which he proclaimed the right of the Jews and thus began an historic friendship between the Jews and the Persians that lasted until modern times. Last Friday, Rouhani assured us that in pursuit of its nuclear program, Iran, this is a quote, Iran has never chosen deceit and secrecy. Never chosen deceit and secrecy. Well, in 2002, Iran was caught red-handed, secretly building an underground centrifuge facility in Natanz. And then, in 2009, Iran was again caught red-handed, secretly building a huge underground nuclear facility for uranium enrichment in a mountain near Qom. Rouhani tells us not to worry. He assures us that all of this is not intended for nuclear weapons. Any of you believe that? If you believe that, here's a few questions you might want to ask. Why would a country that claims to only want peaceful nuclear energy, why would such a country build hidden underground enrichment facilities? Why would a country with vast natural energy reserves invest billions in developing nuclear energy? Why would a country intent on merely civilian nuclear programs continue to defy multiple Security Council resolutions and incur the tremendous cost of crippling sanctions on its economy? And why would a country with a peaceful nuclear program develop intercontinental ballistic missiles whose sole purpose is to deliver nuclear warheads? You don't build ICBMs to carry TNT thousands of miles away. You build them for one purpose, to carry nuclear warheads. And Iran is building now ICBMs that the United States says could reach this city in 3 or 4 years. Why would they do all this? The answer is simple. Iran is not building a peaceful nuclear program. Iran is developing nuclear weapons. Last year alone, Iran enriched 3 tons of uranium to 3.5%, doubled its stockpile of 20% enriched uranium, and added thousands of new centrifuges, including advanced centrifuges. It also continued work on the heavy water reactor in Iraq. That's in order to have another route to the bomb, a plutonium path. And since Rouhani's election, and I stress this vast and feverish effort has continued unabated. Ladies and gentlemen, underground nuclear facilities, heavy water reactors, advanced centrifuges, ICBMs. See, it's not that it's hard to find evidence that Iran has a nuclear program, a nuclear weapons program. It's hard to find evidence that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. I'm prepared to make an historic compromise for a genuine and enduring peace, but I will never compromise on the security of my people and of my country, the one and only Jewish state. In our time, the biblical prophecies are being realized. As the prophet Amos said, they shall rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall till gardens and eat their fruit. And I will plant them upon their soil, never to be uprooted again. ושבתי את שבות עמי ישראל, ובנו ערים נשמות וישבו, ונטו כרמים ושתו את יינם, ועשו גינות ואכלו את פריים, ונטטים על אדמתם, ולא ינטשו עוד. Ladies and gentlemen, the people of Israel have come home never to be uprooted again.
Historic hatred of Israel rampant throughout the epicenter. The rise of radical Islam. An Iranian regime convinced that the end is near and feverishly trying to build, buy, or steal nuclear weapons. It's a recipe for disaster. It's also raising intriguing new questions in the U.S. and around the world about the relevance of ancient Bible prophecies that suddenly seem as real as today's headlines. More than 2,500 years ago, the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel described a future war in the Middle East that Bible scholars have called the War of Gog and Magog. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you about, and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them wielding swords. Persia, Cush, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer with all its troops. Beth Togarmah from the remote parts of the north with all its troops, many peoples with you. And you will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It shall come about in the last days that I will bring you against my land.
It's well known among Bible scholars for two reasons. The first is it's the occasion which God himself intervenes to quell an ill-fated attempt to invade Israel by a group of people called Magog and their allies. And the allies are listed there in the past: Persia, Cush, Put, Libya, Gomer, Togarmah, Meshech, and Tubal, and so forth. And the second reason it's so well known by so many is it appears to allude to the use of nuclear weapons. And we'll take a quick look at some of that. But to cut through a lot of the identities, what happens, there's a group called Magog, one of the sons of Japheth, and his descendants, and they, a group of peoples by their ancient names, are, and you have a map in there that attempts to highlight some of those, but they align themselves in an attempt to invade Israel. And that attempt is thwarted by hailstones of fire and all kinds of exciting things. Sheba and Dedan are on the sidelines saying, what are you guys doing? They're not participants nor defenders. They're on the sidelines. Strange situation here.
While they may or may not believe in the biblical War of Gog and Magog, even leading Middle East experts recognize the danger of the alliance that is now forming between Russia and Iran, an alliance that is forming for the first time in the 2,500 years since Ezekiel wrote his prophecy.
One of the prophecies that most intrigues me in the Bible is Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, what Bible scholars call the war of Gog and Magog. Gog, we find out, is not a personal name. It's a title, like a pharaoh or a czar. Now, he is the leader over a territory called Magog. The Magogites, the people of Magog, are the people whom the Greeks called Scythians. These are the people group who settled north of the Black and Caspian Seas in what we now call Russia and the former Soviet republics. So what we're talking about with Gog is a Russian dictator, someone who's going to oversee Russia as they begin to form an alliance with Iran and a group of other Middle Eastern countries to attack Israel, to try to destroy or annihilate Israel in the last days. When you look at events in the Middle East through a third lens of Bible prophecy, sometimes dots begin to connect and you can begin to anticipate what's coming.
I think it's interesting that after Rosh is referred to, which can be almost indisputably proven to be Russia, then you have the Persia. Well, in 1930 is when they changed the name to Iran. It had been Persia up until that time, so we're still talking about the same place.
In the 2,500 years since Ezekiel wrote the prophecy, Russia and Iran have never had a military alliance of anything like what's developing now.
They have been close allies for some time. They have funded their weaponry. They have backed some of their policies. They have built reactors for them or are in the process of building reactors for them, nuclear reactors. So there is an alliance that certainly could trigger a movement.
I really believe that we are on the very verge of Ezekiel 38 being fulfilled and 39. I think that the alignment of the nations right now, Russia's support of Iran and of the other Muslim nations that are listed as the aggressors against Israel in chapter 38, it surely is all, the stage is set and the nations are in place.
The countries are aligning. Russia is one of the best friends of the Arab world right now. They used to be enemies, but now they're making friends because they've got a common interest. They want world domination. I guess the Russians have made them think they can trust them, and the Arabs think that they have convinced the Russians that they can trust them, but I wouldn't trust either one of them. But it's going to be interesting to see how these two get together and go down against Israel, and then the world abandons Israel, and only God can save them.
The reason everybody's excited about this topic, the reason I chose it, there's so many things happening that seem to be setting the stage. There's the Arab-Israeli conflict is intensifying. The Iranian nuclear emergence is a topic of almost every day in the newspaper. There's been new oil discoveries in the Caspian Sea between Russia and Iran. All that is interesting, fueling this view. But all these are but preparatory steps for the main event, huh? So this is contemporary stuff written 2,550 years ago. That catches our attention, right? Let's review this now. We've got Magog, we've got all these. Do you notice something strange about the attackers here? There's something very weird that most people miss, including me, until recently. Jeep and D-Dan are just spectators. Why is there no mention of Israel's immediate neighbors? Have you ever noticed that in this entire passage, there are people that are conspicuous by not being mentioned? Where's the Lebanese? Where's the Syrians? Where's Iraq? Where are the Jordanians? Where are the Egyptians? Where are the Saudi Arabians? Well, they're mentioned, I guess, as spectators, not participants. That's strange, isn't it? And where are the Palestinians? Maybe they're there and we never noticed, or something strange is going on here. We have Israel right in the middle of this, and around Israel we have Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Palestinians. They're not mentioned in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 proceedings. Why? Are they not players? They're not going to join in this frolic to wipe Israel out? What's going on here? See, we know there's 4 prerequisites to Ezekiel 38, namely from Ezekiel 37, the dry bones and all of that. The nation's reestablished as a sovereign state. Okay, we've watched that happen. A nation that's militarily secure. Well, they certainly have succeeded in a number of skirmishes, but they're certainly not secure. A nation at apparent peace in the Middle East? I don't think so. A nation restored to a position of their material fortunes? They're not doing badly for what they are, but come on, let's get serious. I suspect that the world is in for a big surprise. Now the question is not to look at your newspapers, not to peek through intelligence briefs, we've done that too, but to look at the text of the Bible and see what it says. Okay? Is there a surprise coming? Is there an overlooked event that precedes the ill-fated invasion attempt featured in Ezekiel 38 and 39? That's my question of the morning. And the answer is in the book of Psalms. A little book of Psalms that we want to look at a little more carefully. Psalm 83. Let's take a look at it.
So dig this. A man was bulldozing a bog in central Ireland the other day when he noticed something unusual in the freshly turned soil. Turns out he'd unearthed an early medieval treasure, an ancient book of Psalms that experts date to the years 800 to 1000. Experts say it will take years of painstaking work to document and preserve this book, but eventually it will go on public display. Now here's the kicker. The book, about 20 pages of Latin script, was allegedly found open to Psalm 83. Now, if you're a scholar, as you know, Psalm 83, God hears complaints that other nations are plotting to wipe out the name of Israel. Well, that's precisely the kind of news nugget that would get the attention of my next guest, a seemingly random event with an eerie coincidence to reality. So, Joel, are we living in the last days? I mean, let's talk about the specific signs to watch. You've written about them. What does the Bible say, and are we there?
Well, people are very interested. I agree. You know, Tim and Jerry's books deal with the rapture, the disappearance of the church, and the events going forward in Revelation. My series, the Ezekiel option, the Copper Scroll, are about events that could lead up to the rapture and the return of Christ. Yeah, people are interested because the rebirth of Israel, the fact that Jews are living in the Holy Land today, that is a Bible prophecy. When Iran, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Russia, they begin to form an alliance against Israel, those are the prophecies from Ezekiel 38 and 39. We're seeing Bible prophecy bit by bit unfold in the Middle East right now.
And you talk about epic battles for Jerusalem, you know, the biblical prophecy. Get specific with us. Tell us what's happening now that totally correlates with what you've written about biblically.
Well, that's right. Ezekiel 36 and 37, those are chapters in the Bible, the Old Testament, about the rebirth of the state of Israel and Jerusalem coming back under Jewish control. We've seen those prophecies happen. Ezekiel 38 and 39, what my novel The Ezekiel Option is about, is an alliance of Islamic countries to destroy Israel and liberate Jerusalem. Are we seeing that come true yet? That's the big question. Then Ezekiel 40 through 48, that's the rebirth of the Jewish temple, the rebuilding of it, in Jerusalem. Now, you know, if that happened in our lifetime, that alone could unleash the wrath of 1 billion Muslims worldwide. That's what the Copper Scroll is about. Hunting for treasures, hunting for ancient documents, and the series of events that could unfold that would lead to the Jewish temple and an apocalyptic war in the Middle East.
The Jews came back into their land, and this marked that event. The Jews got Jerusalem back, their capital, their city, the holy city back. They got the Holy Land back, I'll just say it this way. And then they got the Holy City back. And this one, I believe they will get the Holy Temple back. Holy Land, Holy City, Holy Temple. And if that is the case, Revelation 11, numerous places actually in Scripture say that the temple will be rebuilt. Revelation 11, which is a mid-trib chapter, shows that temple. So, in Revelation 11, we've got, in the middle of the tribulation period, we've got a temple, and it has not been built yet, but it needs to be built, and I believe that it will be built starting to be built in this time period because halfway into it, the Antichrist defiles it.
And turning overseas now, security forces in Israel are on high alert ahead of tomorrow's global march to Jerusalem. Organizers hope 1 million people will march on the border of Israel. But as Chris Mitchell warns, concern is growing that the event is one more way to attack the Jewish state.
100,000 marched in the streets of Morocco earlier this week, chanting they would redeem Jerusalem with their blood. Organizers of the global march to Jerusalem hope that same result takes place at Israel's borders and its embassies around the world. The event's website states, "The march will demand freedom for Jerusalem and its people and put an end to the apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and Judaization policies affecting the people, land, and sanctity of Jerusalem." Organizers behind the global march to Jerusalem accuse Israel of Judaizing Jerusalem. But Israel supporters say that the Jewish connection to Jerusalem goes back 3,000 years. Some fear Friday's marches could turn violent. In June 2011, thousands of Syrians tried to breach Israel's northern border. Several died during the confrontation with Israeli troops. Some believe it's this kind of incident that would play into the hands of the organizers by making Israel look bad. This email exchange by two organizers gives an insight into what some are hoping. This will undermine the Israeli state like no other strategy, and then it will all begin to unravel, and the Zionist edifice, which is unraveling as we speak, will soon fall.
The real war now, again, putting Iran aside, the real war is the war of public opinions, the war of television and writing, and radio, the internet.
Middle East expert Daniel Pipe says the march represents a new strategy.
To embarrass Israel, and to make life difficult. I mean, how are you going to stop a large number of people marching? So I think it's indicative of a new way of expressing hostility and trying to delegitimate and eventually eliminate Israel.
The participants are a virtual who's who of Israel's enemies. The Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and some of the parties involved in last year's flotilla, which tried to break Israel's naval blockade of the Gaza Strip. And don't forget Iran. Israeli intelligence sources report Iran is directly helping organize the marches. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei has openly declared his support of the march to Jerusalem. Critics also point out the irony of nations like Syria and Iran accusing Israel of human rights abuse. Just across the border, the Assad regime has killed thousands of his own people.
This is by Asaph. It says, "Keep not silence, O God, hold not thy peace, be not still, O God, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head." This is a rather puzzling psalm by Asaph. It's the last psalm of the Asaph series. But they that hate thee, hate who? God. The people he's going to talk about have something in common. They hate Jehovah. And whoever these enemies are, they hate God and they're lifting their head. Okay, let's find out something about them. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people. Who's thy people? Israel. And consulted against thy hidden ones. That's a strange phrase. Hidden ones? Is this also post-harpazo? I suspect that, but let's just keep going here. Psalmist continues, they have said, "Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel shall be no more in remembrance. They have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee, God." This is the very commitment of Islam, isn't it? Right? To wipe Israel off the face of the map. That's the primary basis of the confederation. Who do you suppose that might be making reference to? Well, Iran is one of the members, but not the only one. The whole Muslim community is organized around this in a very strange way.
وكأن الذي قتل يهودي واحد كأنه قتل 30 مليون يهودي.
المسلمين لثأرا لا والله لن ينقضي
على يهود هنا في فلسطين. هذا من أروع ألوان البركة الحقيقية لفلسطين.
والأمة العربية والإسلامية اليوم صاعدة ناهضة سوف تستعيد زعامة العالم.
مع الصهاينة وما يريدون وإما الحرب. هذا ما يعرفه هؤلاء المحتلين لأرض فلسطين المعتدين على الفلسطينيين، هؤلاء مصاصي الدماء مشعلي الحروب أحفاد القردة والخنازير. يجب أن نقاومهم بكل وسائل المقاومة، مقاومة في فلسطين، مقاومة فلسطين في داخل أرض فلسطين عسكرية ضد هؤلاء الصهاينة المجرمين الذين يعتدون على أرض فلسطين وعلى الفلسطينيين.
گاهی سردمداران رژیم صهیونیستی ما رو تهدید هم میکنن، تهدید به حمله نظامی میکنن، اما به نظرم خودشون هم میدانند و اگر نمیدانند بدانند که اگر غلطی از اونها سر بزند جمهوری اسلامی تل آویو و حیفا رو با خاک یکسان خواهد کرد.
ارجع للبيوت يا شباب، ارجع
Oh shit! Yeah. Oh, holy shit! Oh shit! They just stayed in the truck, man. I'm down.
وقول أرجلك وقف يلعن أبوكم. الله أكبر لوقت الرجل والكتاب الأخرى عن القضاء حيث حميشو. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
A prominent Islamic extremist declared on Thursday that Israel has no right to exist. Egyptian-born Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi made his remarks during a landmark visit to the Gaza Strip. The popular Sunni, who hosts an Al Jazeera television show called Sharia and Life, led a group of clerics that crossed the Rafah border from Egypt. "We will never recognize Israel," al-Qaradawi said during a speech at the Islamic University of Gaza. "We are the owners of that right to own that land, and we will continue our work to restore our rights in this holy land." Al-Qaradawi arrived in Gaza on Wednesday for a visit that is considered a boost of legitimacy for Hamas, the terrorist organization that controls the territory. He also met with Hamas's leader, Ismail Haniyeh. While at the university, they signed a document protesting Israel's control of Jerusalem.
Now, I know that some in the international community think I'm exaggerating this threat. Sure, they know that Iran's regime leads a these chants, death to America, death to Israel, that it pledges to wipe Israel off the map. But they think that this wild rhetoric is just bluster for domestic consumption. Have these people learned nothing from history? The last century has taught us that when a radical regime with global ambitions gets awesome power, sooner or later, its appetite for aggression knows no bounds. That's the central lesson of the 20th century. And we cannot forget it. The world may have forgotten this lesson. The Jewish people have not. Iran's fanaticism is not bluster. It's real. This fanatic regime must never be allowed to arm itself with nuclear weapons. I know that the world is weary of war. We in Israel, we know all too well the cost of war. But history has taught us that to prevent war tomorrow, we must be firm today.
Let's continue. It lists the gang here. Not the gang we just read about in Ezekiel 38, a different group of people, the inner ring.
All right, now, Jerry, you know, there are a number of people, I'm sure, that would sit back and go, you know what, that Jerry and that Joel, they are crazy. How can you take this book that was written more than 1,000 years ago? These are just stories. You can't relate it to what's happening right now. What do you say to those critics?
We have a group of enemies listed here, people who want to destroy Israel, and we have the tabernacles of Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Hagarenes, Gabal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistines, inhabitants of Tyre. It just goes down a list of people here, and I'm sure that people reading your book have in the back of their mind a criticism like, well, how does Bill Salas know that this is talking about today's enemies? It may be talking about the enemies of some other time. How do you know, and I'm sure you've been asked this question, how do you know that Psalm 83 applies to what's happening today? Most of these names here in Psalm 83, they're tribal names. They are the heads of ancient tribes, and their descendants are still alive and well today in the Mideast.
Edomites, Ammonites, Moabites, megabytes, gigabytes. I mean, now people humor with that. Oh, I understand gigabytes and megabytes, but they don't know who the Edomites and the Ammonites and the Moabites are, and that's why those charts are and images are good to show on a map who the modern day equivalents are. Because Asaph, who wrote the psalm, did not have Hezbollah, Hamas, Jordanians.
Right.
These are modern day terms. So how is he going to explain to us who he's talking about, but by the terms he's familiar with, the tribes he's familiar with, the territories he's familiar with?
Now, down here in verse 9, in what I consider, a plea to God, Asaph says, "Do unto them as unto the Midianites." And so he's imploring God, treat these enemies of Israel the same way you treated the Midianites. Well, which takes us back to the incident, of the defeat of the Midianites
with Gideon. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting to me. He lays out this plan to wipe Israel off the map in the first 5 verses.
Right.
Then he talks about who's involved in this confederacy that wants to make this plan happen. And then he tells us how petitions the Lord, how he'd like the Lord to respond to that. These are 2 different historic episodes in Israel's history. What I find interesting, Gary, is that Asaph doesn't say, deal with them like you did with Pharaoh at the Red Sea. Okay. What's interesting is at that time, there was a bunch of refugees, these Hebrews coming out of 400 years of bondage in Egypt, and they had no Israeli defense forces. They were simply refugees. And the Lord, as we know, of course, the Pharaoh's army was coming against the Hebrews. Lord parts the Red Sea. Hebrews go through. Pharaoh's army goes into the Red Sea. The waters converge, and they were destroyed. The Lord stopped that. The Lord is going to stop Ezekiel 38 and 39, another different prophecy. The Lord, Jesus Christ, is going to stop the Armageddon campaign with the Antichrist and those sort of things. But the Israeli Defense Forces are involved in Psalm 83.
Uh-huh.
And so what he's doing, he has historical precedent that he can draw from. The book of Judges, chapters 4 through 8, is where you find these historical accounts. So he says, deal with them like these historical accounts, where you empowered the IDF of those times. Interesting, the IDF of that time in Judges 6 through 8, the Midianites was Gideon and his 300-man army.
Yeah.
Now, come on. That was outnumbered, outmanned, out-arrowed, and
you know what,
Gideon
Bill,
won that war.
As you say that, you're talking about one of my favorite parts of the Bible. Poor little Gideon, is a guy threshing wheat, hiding out from the Midianites. He's scared to death, and God comes to him and says, I want you to crush the Midianites for me, Gideon. And Gideon doesn't think he can do that. Well, I identify with somebody like that. Mm-hmm. And today's Israel is like a little Gideon. That is to say, Israel is not very big among nations. And God is saying, in effect, to Israel, I have a destiny for you. I want you to go ahead and step out and do just as Gideon did in the old days. So, and they're going to reenact that role.
Well, it's an amazing lesson. The Midianites had oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. They were very powerful. And so Gideon goes out and he defeats them from top to bottom. They're kings or princes. And they killed 120,000 Midianites with these 300 men. Now, come on. That is clearly an empowerment of the Lord of the IDF of that time.
Right.
And the Midianites never oppressed Israel again. See, it was a decisive defeat. The time had come for them not to oppress Israel anymore, and they won that war. Top to bottom, outnumbered, outmanned, outgunned. And that's, to me, the lesson we have here. Asaph is saying, deal with them top to bottom, infantry to their leaders. They've been oppressing us. Make it so they can never oppress us again. And everybody wants to know what's going to happen over there next in the Middle East. And the Bible's quite clear on what's going to happen next. We have wars coming, Gary. We have Psalm 83, a final Arab-Israeli war, which is followed in the aftermath, probably on the heels of it relatively rapidly, with a major war, probably another Muslim-type war in Ezekiel 38 and 39. That is a really big war. Each one of these wars seems to get bigger. And then ultimately, you have the Armageddon War, where the Antichrist will ultimately try to destroy the nation of Israel and the Jews. Inside of those, you've got peripheral prophecies, too, with the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. Probably got something to do with Psalm 83. Isaiah 19, dealing with Egypt. These are the countries that are in the news right now that are about to go into a scenario where you actually now are going to have probably much more than a regional conflict or another skirmish. You're going to have a war of epic biblical proportion.
Is prophecy being fulfilled in our day?
Well, it is. Israel in 1948 was a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. I think there were other prophecies during the church age we could talk about, and that would probably be another show, but I think we're going to see Psalm 83. The question is, will these things happen in the church age?
Yes.
See, this is the thing. We're living on borrowed time here as a church. Jesus has got to be coming real soon to get his bride out of here. So the question is there going to be a photo finish between the fulfillment of some of these prophecies and the rapture of the church? Are we going to be here for Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, and this type of thing? I believe these are all pre-trib prophecies. So really it's an important time to understand these prophecies and to use them as the witnessing tools you're talking about. Psalm 83, verse 18 is quite clear. It says, in the end, Asaph's petition is of the Lord, that after this war, that they may know that Jehovah, who alone is the Lord, the God of the Bible, is the Most High of the earth, the one true God. It'll be the end of the controversy of are Allah and Jehovah the same God? Is Islam, is Allahu Akbar, God, Allah is the greater God that the Muslims yell out when they're doing suicide bombings in the streets anyway. That controversy is going to be over. The point I'm getting to, Gary, is that God is going to evidence that he's God. He's going to do it in Psalm 83. He's going to use these wars to show that he's God in Ezekiel 39, Ezekiel 38, the other war. We talked about this in a recent program. He's going to uphold his holy name in the midst of his people Israel. They shall not profane it anymore, and the nation shall know he's the Lord. This will be the end result. That really, it's not about the wars. It's not about the prophecies. It's about God. It's about having him evidence that he's God to a world that needs to know this. And he's going to do that. He's going to powerfully do that through these prophecies. And we're right on the verge of watching them happen.
You know, Bill, it has amazed me lately, as a longtime people watcher, how quickly things have changed in the last, say, 5 to 8 years. How quickly we have moved away from a God consciousness into a secularization in our television programming, our advertising programming, in our academic institutions, in grade school. I mean, culture-wide, we are not just drifting away from God anymore. We are racing away from God at an accelerating rate. And to me, that is one of the sure signs of the end right there. But I think that God's going to give us one last shot, and my prayer is for a revival. I want to see God's people go out there with renewed strength and say, look, prophecy is being fulfilled. You need to understand this. And I think you and I are both on the same page there. This would be your desire as well.
Well, it is, Gary. And we are seeing a bit of revival in certain pockets of persecuted areas, like Iran and Syria and things like that. Across the body of Christ, we would wish that for America as well. You know, we seem so complacent anymore, and the churches are not teaching these messages, broad brushing, but generally they're not teaching Psalm 83 or the destruction, you know, the kind of prophecies that are stage setting and that we need to know about and be familiar with, because the world is watching the same news we're watching, and we have information we can share with them. And where do we get it? Right out from the Word of God.
I think the most dramatic headline that we're likely to see in our lifetime is that when this Russian-Iranian alliance comes to destroy Israel, that God supernaturally intervenes to protect Israel.
You'll have all this hopelessness seen in the homes by TV of the Israelis, and then all of a sudden God gives them victory. Not through might nor by power, but by His Spirit. He will give them a victory.
With pestilence and with blood, I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain on him and on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him, a torrential rain with hailstones, fire, and brimstone. I will magnify myself, sanctify myself, and make myself known in the sight of many nations, and they will know that I am the Lord.
That will be the most exciting event in the history of the world, when Almighty God shows He's really in charge. He's going to bear His arm and prove to all the atheists and the skeptics that deny His existence that He really exists.
You will not find the EU, you will not find the UN, you will not find the US. But the scriptures say that God is going to supernaturally intervene with fire from heaven and earthquakes and pandemics, the likes of which the world has never seen before, and it could happen in our lifetime.
Meanwhile, inside the epicenter, the pressure is building and the clock is ticking. The tremors from the Middle East are being felt around the world. Anxieties are rising, and so are the questions. What if the Bible is true? What if recent events in Russia and Iran were foretold centuries ago? What if the ancient prophecies about Israel and her neighbors actually do come to pass, and sooner than anyone might imagine?
See, apparently, the only way the world is going to know that God is God is for Him to move in judgment. That's the flavor of this and a lot of related passages. If you study Ezekiel 25 through 32, you'll discover there's judgment on 7 nations: Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, Edom. This same gang of characters, right? What do they have in common? They're not all Arabs. Egyptians are not Arabs. Most of these are not Arabs. We use that term loosely. No, they're Muslims. Okay? So at the present time, Israel is immediately surrounded by neighbors that are committed to wiping them off the map. Not taking spoil, wiping them off. You see the difference? It's misleading to regard them as Arabs. They're Muslims. It would seem, as you look at the text, that there is a prerequisite victory for Israel that will set the stage for the subsequent ill-fated attempt to invade by these outer nations. Seeking what? Spoils. Different motivation. What's the order of events? If you compare this with Ezekiel and Isaiah and Jeremiah and so forth, and Obadiah and even Deuteronomy, Israel's regathered in the land, ancient cities are rebuilt and inhabited, they meet resistance, Muslim, Arab, call it what you will. Israel establishes an army to defend themselves. The adjacent Muslim nations confederate themselves despite their own differences. You know, the Sunnis and the Shiite Muslims hate each other almost as much as they hate Israel. What bonds them together is their common commitment to wipe Israel off the map. And the Palestinians are their pawns for their purposes, their surrounding. The Confederacy is committed to the destruction of Israel. War starts between the Confederacy and Israel. The title apparently is regained by them then, as some passages imply, that they now are my people, Israel. Israel then decisively defeats the Confederacy, and the scriptures are full of those details. Israel's become, by now, an exceedingly great army. They take prisoners of war, according to Jeremiah and Zephaniah. The whole region is reshaped, and that's where Damascus gets theirs. Everybody asks, where's Damascus, Isaiah 17:1? I think it's here. Israel expands its borders back to what the Abrahamic covenant requires. Somebody says, what about the West Bank? Which river? We're talking about the West Bank of the Euphrates, not the Jordan. Okay? Israel then dwells securely in the land. It's not over yet, because then she's going to experience the Ezekiel 38 business, and not only that, forthcoming will be the great, because a world leader is going to, in honor to them, get into a covenant with them, but then blow the covenant halfway through, and you know that story, and then you get to the Great Tribulation, and so on and so forth. So what's your challenge this morning? You and I have no impact on this. We just want to understand what the text is telling us. Okay? I'm going to put something on the screen, which if you accept what I put on the screen, you flunk the course. Okay? I believe you and I are being plunged into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does about any other period of time in history, including the time that Jesus walked the shores of Galilee and climbed the mountains of Judah. Now that's a preposterous statement. That we're moving into a period of time about which the Bible says more than it does about the gospel period? You got to be kidding. I'm not. But what is it? I don't want you to accept that. You flunk if you do. No, I want you to challenge that. It's a ridiculous statement. Challenge it. How do you do it? You got to do two things. The first thing you got to do is you got to find out what the Bible says. Not what Chuck Missler or any of your favorite speakers or TV, whatever. With all apologies to God TV, I appreciate them. They're doing, we're getting incredible, wonderful worldwide play with them, and we love that. But don't believe what I'm telling you. Find out for yourself. It's too important to be delegated to anybody else. Your eternity hangs on it. Find out what the Bible really says. Now, you and I live in the most unique environment in the history of man. The Word of God today is more available than it's ever been on the entire planet Earth. Okay? Because of the advanced information appliances we have. We carry phones that can have that can have the Bible in 6 different versions, including Greek and Hebrew. And in today's world, you as an individual can get to the original text in the Greek or the Hebrew without knowing Greek or Hebrew. Put your little arrow over a word, and it'll put a pop-up and tell you what the word is, what part of speech it is, and it'll diagram the sentence if you wanted to. And the software to do that is free. Free. Now, there are some wonderful packages out that are you can spend hundreds of dollars if you like. You don't need to. eSword will do all that for you, and it's free for the asking. The Blue Letter Bible on the internet, free. So all that's available to anybody today. You can, in a 30-minute session, do what used to take a pastor 6 weeks of study. Because all these things, all these incredible resources are word searchable. If somebody gave me a 30-volume set of the Ante-Nicene Fathers, gee, wouldn't that be wonderful? What would I do with it? I don't have time to read that. I carry it in my laptop. And if I want to find out what Irenaeus said to the Apostle John, on the subject of love, it'll show me. I don't have to read it. It finds it for me. In other words, the information tools we have today are breathtaking. And the internet resources, I've talked about that. The role of small groups, and I've been a practicing Christian for 60 years. And the place that I see people grow is not from a 45-minute sermon Sunday morning. No. It's from a small group that meets during the week, a group from 6 to 12. Small enough that you can ask questions without embarrassment. Small enough to hold each other accountable. That's where people bloom. Holy Spirit takes over. You don't have to be a teacher, by the way, to run a small group. You invite some people over for coffee and donuts, pop a DVD in the thing, let it play for a bit, and then talk about it. And just guide the discussion. You don't have to know the answers. Holy Spirit will take over. Now, that's the first thing you do. Find out what the Bible says. Second thing, got to find out what's going on. And you won't on the 10 o'clock news. Where Americans are finally waking up to realize that we have corruption in the media. We have media that delights in shaping opinions rather than informing. We're not talking about political bias here. We're talking about deliberate masking the truth. See, you and I live in the age of deceit. So you need to find out what's going on, and there are ways to do that, but it's going to take some energy and some effort and some resources. So what do? What is your action plan as a result of all of this? The question really is, what is God calling you? How many of you are saved in this audience? Can I see a show of hands? Praise God. What have you done with it? What would God save you for? He had a purpose. A general purpose to magnify and glorify His name, sure. Specifically, what did He have in mind? To bear fruit. Good, okay. I'm going to suggest that every one of us in this room, me included, are works in progress. Will a year from now, will we have progressed spiritually? I hope I have. I'd hate to think that a year from now I'm right where I am today. I'd like to feel that there's some growth taking place. Huh? It won't happen by happenstance, it'll happen by commitment. Commitment. And that commitment will include being committed to a systematic studying the Word of God. Well, I read it every day. No. That's devotional reading. I take that for granted. I mean a systematic study of the Word of God. Verse by verse, cover to cover. It's a lifetime thing.
Nobody knows the day or the hour. But on the other hand, why should we be looking for times and seasons?
Well, I think because Jesus said so. Jesus rebuked the Pharisees because they didn't know the times and the seasons. Well, I think it's very important for us to realize something. If you remember during the story of Joseph told Jacob, his mom was dead, but told his father Jacob and his other brothers that he had this dream of the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down to him. Mm-hmm. And Jacob said, well, I and your mother and your 11 brothers bow down to you. So we see that Israel was equated to the sun, the moon, and the stars. Mm-hmm. Well, we know in Genesis 1:14, God created the sun, the moon, and the stars for signs and signals. Well, now we see Israel is equated to the sun, the moon, and the stars. So Israel also as a nation was created as a sign to send us signals of what God is doing. So that's why we need to look back to Israel, because they were created as signs.
And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And I will show wonders in heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before that great and notable day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Watch, therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the goodman of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh." Chapter 5. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars. And upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And he spake to them a parable. Behold the fig tree, and all the trees. When they now shoot forth, ye see and know of your own selves that summer is now nigh at hand. So likewise ye, when ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. But of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Take ye heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is. For the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house, and gave authority to his servants, and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning, lest, coming suddenly, he find you sleeping. And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch. Let your loins be girded about, and your lights burning, and ye yourselves like unto men that wait for their Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the Lord when he cometh shall find watching. Verily I say unto you, that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. And this know, that if the goodman of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched, and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh at an hour when ye think not. Then Peter said unto him, Lord, speakest thou this parable unto us, or even to all? And the Lord said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household, to give them their portion of meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Of a truth I say unto you, that he will make him ruler over all that he hath. But, and if that servant say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to beat the menservants and maidservants, and to eat and drink and to be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looketh not for him, and at an hour when he is not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. And that servant which knew his Lord's will, and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not, and did commit things worthy of stripes, shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more.